In this video, we are going to see the derivation of two formulas in trigonometry. They are sine square x equals to 1 negative cosine 2x over 2 and cosine square x equals to 1 positive cosine 2x over 2. Okay, now I'm going to consider a particular part in both the formulas, that is cosine 2x over here and here. Okay, in this cosine 2x, let's consider the x over here as an angle measure and it is multiplied by 2. Since the angle measure x is multiplied by 2, we can say that the angle measure x is doubled, and also here we have the trigonometric function cosine. So now what we can do is we can consider the double angle formula of cosine. So that is cosine 2x equals to, we have cosine square x and negative sine square x. So this is the double angle formula of cosine. Okay, now let me consider the Pythagorean identity in trigonometry, that is sine square x positive cosine square x equals to 1. Okay, in this Pythagorean identity, if I want to solve for cosine square x, what should I do? I have to subtract sine square x from both sides. In this Pythagorean identity, if I subtract sine square x from both sides, then I'm getting cosine square x equals to 1 negative sine square x. In case in the same identity, if I want to solve for sine square x, what should I do? I have to subtract cosine square x from both sides. So when I subtract cosine square x from both sides in this identity, then I'm getting sine square x equals to 1 negative cosine square x. Okay, now let's start proving the first formula, that is sine square x equals to 1 negative cosine 2x over 2. Okay, for that, what I'm going to do is in this double angle formula of cosine 2x, I'm going to replace this cosine square x by 1 negative sine square x from Pythagorean identity. Okay, let me continue over here. So cosine 2x equals to, so I'm going to replace this cosine square x by the equivalent stuff for 1 negative sine square x, and already we have negative sine square x over here. Let me write it as it is. Okay, now cosine 2x equals to 1. When I combine negative sine square x and negative sine square x over here, I'm getting negative 2 sine square x. Okay, our aim is to solve for sine square x. So for that, we have to isolate sine square x on the right side over here. For that, first I have to get up this 1. For that, I subtract 1 from both sides. When I do so, this positive and negative 1 will cancel out. I'm getting negative 1 positive cosine 2x equals to negative 2 times sine square x. Okay, now to get up the negative sign, I'm going to multiply both sides of this equation by negative 1. Let me do it. Negative 1 times negative 1 positive cosine 2x equals to negative 1 times negative 2 sine square x. Okay, now let me continue the stuff over here. Now let's distribute this negative 1 to this negative 1 and positive cosine 2x. When I do so, I'm getting 1 negative cosine 2x on the left side. When I multiply this negative, negative, I'm getting positive. 1 times 2 sine square x is just 2 sine square x. Okay, let me write it out here. Okay, since our aim is to solve for sine square x, I have to get up this 2 which is multiplied over here. For that, I have to divide both sides by 2. When I do so, this 2 will cancel out. On the left side, I'm getting 1 negative cosine. Let me write it. 1 negative cosine 2x over 2 equals to sine square x. Okay, now I got the derivation of the first formula, that is sine square x equals to 1 negative cosine 2x over 2. Okay, now let me erase the stuff and get the derivation of the second formula. Now let's get the derivation of the second formula, that is cosine square x equals to 1 positive cosine 2x over 2. Since this one also contains a part cosine 2x, we can use the double angular formula of cosine, that is cosine 2x equals to cosine square x negative sine square x. Now in this double angle formula, what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace this sine square x by 1 negative cosine square x. So we got this one using the Pythagorean identity. Okay, now in this cosine double angle formula, the sine square x will be replaced by the equivalence of 1 negative cosine square x. Let me continue over here. So cosine 2x equals to cosine square x negative. Now we can plug in 1 negative cosine square x of sine square x. Okay, then we get cosine 2x equals to cosine square x. Now we can distribute this negative sign to 1 and negative cosine square x, and I'm getting negative 1 positive cosine square x. Now we have cosine 2x equals to, when I combine this cosine square x and cosine square x, I'm getting 2 times cosine square x negative 1. Okay, our aim is to solve for cosine square x in this equation. For that, we have to isolate cosine square x on the right side. So for that, let me get rid of this negative 1. For that, I have to add 1 to both sides. When I add 1 to both sides, this negative 1 positive will cancel out. I'm getting 1 positive cosine 2x equals to 2 times cosine square x. Okay, now let me continue over here. That is 1 positive cosine 2x equals to 2 times cosine square x. Okay, now to isolate cosine square x, I have to get of the 2 which is multiplied over here. So to get of this 2, I divide both sides of this equation by 2. So then this 2 will cancel out. I'm getting 1 positive cosine 2x over 2 equals to cosine square x. Okay, now I got the derivation of the second formula, that is cosine square x equals to 1 positive cosine 2x over 2.